The 20-year-old disappeared after a date in the early morning hours of December 18th.
There's no clear indication of why she left the apartment again after the date. There was no obvious signs of anything that occurred at the apartment.
Heather Elvis's family and friends mounting a search across several counties again this morning. Teams of volunteers fanning across South Carolina in the bitter cold, searching by boat, by ATV, on foot and horseback.
No amount of attention, no amount of law enforcement, no amount of work, effort that I do or anybody does is ever going to be enough until she's back home again.
Before we jump into the story, I just want to ask you for a quick favor. Please support the channel. Hit that subscribe button, like this video, and if you feel like it, share it. It genuinely helps the project grow and makes it possible to do even more investigations. While you're watching, go ahead and drop a comment. Tell me what city you're from and what the weather's like for you right now. And now, let's get into the story itself. Heather was a 20-year-old woman, the oldest daughter of Terry and Debbie Elvis, natives of South Carolina. She was incredibly close to her parents and her younger sister, like genuinely tight-knit. Later on, her father would describe their relationship this way: "We were always a really close-knit family. The kind where everyone would do absolutely anything for one another." Heather had an especially close bond with her dad. They talked every single day, constantly texting back and forth. She was always incredibly independent, and after graduating from James High School in 2011, she really wanted to move out of her parents' house and rent an apartment with her best friend, Brianna. Terry and Debbie fully supported that decision, like 100%. At 20 years old, Heather was working hard as a waitress at a Scottish-themed restaurant called the Tilted Kilt in Myrtle Beach. At the same time, she was taking cosmetology courses, chasing this long-time dream of becoming a professional makeup artist. Her younger sister, Morgan, once described Heather's goals like this: she was obsessed with makeup. She wanted to be in front of the camera. She honestly didn't see any limits when it came to her dreams. And beyond her creativity and ambition, Heather was really popular and deeply loved around town because of her warm, carefree, and positive energy. Whenever people talked about Heather, they smiled because she just had so much personality, one friend said. And another added lovingly, "I describe Heather as open, free-spirited, completely in love with life. She always wanted to live it to the fullest, like all in." By the beginning of the summer of 2013, Heather had already been living with her best friend Brianna in Myrtle Beach for about a year. Her studies were going well, her life in general felt stable, everything seemed to be falling into place. But all of that was about to change, because one seemingly random encounter at the Tilted Kilt would set off a chain of events that would eventually end in tragedy. On a warm day in June, Heather was working the daytime shift at the busy restaurant. She was taking orders, clearing tables, chatting with customers, just doing her thing, as usual. As she walked back toward the kitchen carrying trays, Heather bumped into 37-year-old Sidney Moorer, a father of 3 and a local maintenance worker who ran a small business repairing broken kitchen equipment around the Myrtle Beach area. They struck up a conversation, and Heather was immediately drawn to him. On her Moonchild account, she hinted at a new crush, writing something like, "I've developed a taste for older men." By the end of July, she posted several sexually suggestive messages on social media, aimed at what she called the guy building something at my job. Heather would also point Sidney out to friends and coworkers, saying, "That's him, that's the guy." Sidney seemed to enjoy the attention, and he started showing up at the restaurant more and more often just to talk to her. People frequently saw them laughing together in the kitchen whenever Sidney was called in to fix equipment. By July, what may have started as a harmless crush appeared to cross into something more serious. Heather posted 2 tweets just 1 minute apart, clearly hinting at a possible romance between her and Sidney. "Baby did a bad thing," she wrote, then followed it with, "I'm in way too deep, but watch me get deeper." By that point, most of Heather's coworkers already knew about the 20-year-old's feelings for Sidney, and rumors about their relationship began spreading fast. We all knew about it because people were kind of making fun of Heather. Since everyone knew he was a married man, Heather was often mocked, and some of the girls she worked with called her names. One day, 2 of them even decided to call the Tilted Kilt and pretend to be Tammy, Sidney's wife. By August, the rumors seemed to be confirmed. Sidney started hanging around the Tilted Kilt on his days off, often bringing Heather coffee and bagels, or sitting in his car behind the restaurant, waiting for her to finish her shift. The two of them also began talking more openly with friends about their relationship. They even told people that Sydney was considering hiring Heather as a full-time nanny for his kids if he and his wife ever moved to Florida. Heather also told her friends that Sydney had offered her a job as a nanny for his children, which everyone found pretty strange, given that there was clearly a sexual relationship between them. Heather and Sydney were in constant contact on their phones, and they would often drive separately to remote, isolated places just to meet up for sex. For Heather, this turned into a toxic, emotional roller coaster. Sydney frequently told her he was unhappy in his marriage and that he planned to leave his wife, something he never actually did. Heather's friends warned her that this older, married man was just stringing her along. By mid-September, all the secrecy and constant hiding started to really weigh on her, and it's believed that on September 21st, Heather tried to end the affair or at least put some kind of stop to it. That seemed to be reflected in a tweet she posted. Once upon a time, an angel and a devil fell in love. It did not end well. Things became even more toxic when Sydney's 34-year-old wife, Tammy, finally found out about the relationship and called Heather. According to Heather's roommate, Brianna, who was there during the call, Tammy humiliated Heather and told her that Sydney had only been using her for casual sex. Furious, Tammy then forced her husband to get on the phone with Heather. Brianna would later describe this conversation to investigators. Sydney screamed at Heather over the phone, "You meant nothing to me. You were just someone who spread her legs." Basically, as Brianna put it, Sydney and Tammy completely crushed Heather as a person. They destroyed her dignity and everything she was, leaving her feeling disgusting and deeply humiliated. Brianna also added that Tammy and Sydney's marriage appeared to be extremely abusive. Later, criminal prosecutor Chris Helms told reporters, Tammy Moorer was absolutely the dominant one in that relationship. She told Sydney where to work, when to work, and what to do. If I had to describe Sydney in that relationship, it would be one word: completely submissive. Chris Helms also said that Tammy was enraged by the affair and had no intention of simply ending her husband's relationship with a younger woman. She wanted to destroy Heather's life. Around this time, Tammy began handcuffing her husband to the bed at night so he couldn't leave while she slept. She also changed the password on his phone to something only she knew, and through pressure, forced him to get a tattoo of her name across his lower abdomen, right above his groin. Sydney agreed to all of these extreme demands, hoping to save his marriage and keep his family together. According to Brianna, Tammy's attacks didn't stop with that phone call. They only escalated into a full-blown campaign of harassment. Tammy repeatedly called Heather's workplace, trying to get her fired. She was relentless. She called Heather from Sydney's phone, sent her explicit photos of herself and Sydney during sexual acts, and even videos of them together. Heather texted Sydney, begging him to make his wife stop. "I lost several hours of work today because they sent me home after she kept calling nonstop." Heartbroken, honestly, just devastated by the way the man she loved had treated her and terrified by the constant attacks and stalking from his wife, Heather desperately tried to get her life back on track. She even started going to church again with her best friend, Brianna. But in early November, Tammy sent Heather messages that were even more aggressive and threatening.
"You either tell me where you are right now, or I'll find out another way. And trust me, that way is not going to end well for you. This is your last chance to answer before we meet in person."
In another message, Tammy wrote, "I've been tracking Sydney since January of 2012. You should really call me and talk to me. Do yourself a favor. So, sweetheart, are you ready to meet the wife?" Heather, who by that point was mentally and physically exhausted by this entire nightmare, replied calmly, "I think you're a little obsessed with me. I'm not someone you need to worry about anymore." Heather genuinely couldn't understand why Tammy wouldn't just leave her alone. Whatever she had with Sydney was over, and all she wanted was to forget the whole thing and move on. By the end of November, a little more than 2 weeks after Tammy's last threatening messages, things finally started to look brighter for Heather. Sydney and Tammy left town with their 3 children on a 3-week road trip across California in a brand new Ford F-150. Once the Moorer family was gone, Heather felt like she could finally relax, even if just for a moment, and breathe freely again. For the first time in a long while, there was a break from Tammy's constant harassment, and that wasn't the only good news in Heather's life. She landed her dream job. She was hired as a makeup artist at a beauty salon and was set to start shortly before Christmas. She was beyond excited, honestly glowing, and couldn't stop talking about it with friends and family. At the same time, though, there was something deeply worrying her, something that could have made the entire situation with the Moorers far worse. In early November, Heather and her co-workers at the Tilted Kilt noticed that the 20-year-old had gained a noticeable amount of weight in a very short period of time. Heather was terrified that she might be pregnant by Sydney. Scared and anxious, she decided to take a pregnancy test right there at the restaurant with the help of her manager, Jessica Cook. Jessica would later tell police that Heather was in absolute panic over Tammy Moore. The test result was inconclusive, and Heather never found out whether she was carrying Sydney's child. Later, her best friend would say, "Hey, who peep her?" Heather took a pregnancy test at work, I think in early November, and at that time, she wasn't sleeping with anyone else except Sydney. Despite all her fears, by the winter of 2013, Heather, the eternal optimist, decided it was time to move forward and start fresh. She wanted healthier, happier relationships, so she agreed to go on a first date with a man she hadn't known for very long but felt a strong, positive gut feeling about, Steve Giraldi. On the night of December 17th, Heather and Steve met around 1 a.m. and decided to drive around Myrtle Beach to look at the Christmas lights. Later, they pulled into a nearby parking lot where Steve helped teach Heather how to drive a manual transmission. Excited and proud, Heather sent her dad and Brianna a smiling photo with a message, "I just learned how to drive stick. I'm a pro." Steve later said they made plans for a second date, and then he dropped Heather off at her apartment in Carolina Forest at around 1:15 a.m. At approximately 1:45 a.m., Brianna, Heather's best friend, received a terrifying phone call. Heather was hysterical, crying uncontrollably. She said, "Sydney called me. My heart just dropped," Brianna later recalled. I was sure this was over. I asked her, "Why did you answer?" And she said, "Because it wasn't his number." Heather explained that Sydney told her he had left his wife, apologized, and said he wanted to see her and be with her. I got angry and told her, "Don't do this. You've just started moving on. You're happy again. You're finally yourself again. Just go to sleep. Sleep on it. In the morning, we'll talk it through." They said goodbye, and that was the end of the call. The next day, December 19th, local police were called to check on a suspiciously abandoned vehicle, a green Dodge Intrepid, parked crookedly and carelessly in a remote, isolated coastal area known as Peachtree Landing. It was about 8 miles from Myrtle Beach, along the Waccamaw River. The area was used as a small boat launch and sat at the end of a long, deserted road with very little traffic. The car was locked. Officers ran the license plates through the registration system and identified the owner. The green Dodge Intrepid was registered to Terry Elvis, Heather's father. At that moment, Terry Elvis was at home, sitting on the living room couch, watching television, when police knocked on his door to inform him about the found vehicle. Confused and unable to reach his daughter by phone, he agreed to go with the officers to Peachtree Landing to see what was going on. When he saw Heather's car, strangely parked in such an isolated spot, he was shocked but not panicked yet. He unlocked the car with a spare key he had and allowed officers to search the interior. Later, he recalled, "I thought the car might have been stolen because of how it was parked. Maybe someone took it and just dumped it there. It really hit me, that question. Where is Heather?" he said, when the officer started going through the things inside the car. When police didn't find Heather's purse, her keys, or her cell phone inside the vehicle, her father began to seriously worry. He tried calling her again. The phone was off. Then he drove to the Tilted Kilt, but staff told him Heather wasn't there and wasn't scheduled to work until the next day. That's when Terry immediately knew something was wrong. "This is absolutely not like Heather," he said. "She would never do this. Something happened." At first, the Horry Police Department did not consider Peachtree Landing or the vehicle itself a crime scene. There was no broken glass, no signs of a struggle, and no blood. Still, a missing person case was opened immediately. Officers and volunteers began searching the area around Peachtree Landing, while divers searched the river nearby.
Heather Elvis's family and friends mounting a search across several counties again this morning. Teams of volunteers fanning across South Carolina in the bitter cold, searching by boat, by ATV, on foot and horseback.
No amount of attention, no amount of law enforcement, no amount of work, effort that I do or anybody does is ever going to be enough until she's back home again.
The 20-year-old disappeared after a date in the early morning hours of December 18th.
There's no clear indication of why she left the apartment again after the date. There was no obvious signs of anything that occurred at the apartment.
Earlier that night, her date was teaching her how to drive a stick shift in this small parking lot. She called a friend afterwards to say how well the date went. Her father says she sent him a text. It was this picture of her driving the car that night.
For years, I tried to teach her how to drive one, and I just didn't have the patience to do it. And now she was doing it on her own. I'm very proud of it.
The next day, when she failed to show up for work, police found her abandoned car at a boat landing not far from her parents' home.
I think that everybody should take a moment to hold their family and tell them that they love them, because sometimes it's not enough to just assume that they know.
Just waiting for the right person to come forward and say, I saw something, or I heard something, or I know something, or I did something.
They've kept the Christmas tree up, and her presents are waiting for her.
Human remains were later found near the boat landing, but testing showed that the bones belonged to a man. With no physical evidence tying anything to Heather, detectives shifted their focus to retracing her movements on December 17th and December 18th. Steve Giraldi, the man Heather had gone out with on the night she was last seen, was brought in for questioning. After speaking with him, investigators quickly ruled him out as a suspect, and he was released.
Well, Tim, you mentioned community, and one small community of Heather's is where she worked, a place where coworkers say they still feel the pain of not having Heather by their side.
Heather worked for us for over a year, and her name, we still keep her name on the schedule, because, she, until there's peace for everyone, her family, the community, our work family, we're keeping her name there.
Against the backdrop of shock and absolute heartbreak, as Heather's family and friends flooded social media with emotional pleas for information and offered a reward, Tammy Moorer immediately went online to continue what really looked like a hate campaign. While Sydney was cheating on me in September and October with a mentally unstable woman who went missing on December 20th. Police soon learned about the intense affair between Sydney and Heather from Heather's roommate, Brianna, as well as several employees at the Tilted Kilt. After that, detectives called Sydney in for questioning. From the very start of the interviews, Sydney came across as evasive and emotionally detached. He denied being anywhere near Peachtree Landing on the night of December 17th or the morning of December 18th. He insisted that he hadn't been in contact with Heather at all, and what sounded especially strange, he claimed that during that time, he and his wife Tammy were driving around in his pickup truck, having sex in public places, and that they were even recording it on their phones. Seasoned detectives had a strong feeling he was lying. They just didn't have the proof yet. When investigators began analyzing Heather's call history and phone data, they finally got their first real breakthrough. Piece by piece, they started reconstructing her final movements and Sydney's role in them. Early in the morning, on December 18th, exactly as Brianna had described, Heather received a call from a number she didn't recognize. She didn't recognize it because the call had been made from a public payphone. The conversation lasted about 5 minutes. After that, Heather clearly panicked, tried calling the number back again and again, starting around 1:35 a.m. In total, she dialed the payphone number 9 times. The only reason someone would call an unknown number 9 times, an investigator later explained, is because they're desperately trying to reconnect with the person they just spoke to. Using Heather's phone records, detectives traced the number to a payphone located near a gas station in Myrtle Beach. Surveillance cameras captured someone using that payphone at the exact time the call to Heather was made. When Sydney was asked whether he had called her, he initially denied it.
Did you try calling her? Just a minute? A second? You sure? Good. Okay, how about we start again?
I did. I called her.
Okay, what did you say?
I asked her to please leave me alone.
Tammy Moorer was questioned as well. She talked at length about her marriage and flat out denied having anything to do with Heather's disappearance. Completely rejecting any involvement.
You guys don't understand. I had boyfriends. We had an open marriage. That's okay. I could care less if he had sex with 100 people. Okay. All right. I mean, that doesn't bother me. So, this girl, I can tell you just as an outsider looking at the Twitter, which I didn't know existed until all this went down, she's not right. She's not normal. I was 20. I partied with bands constantly. I wasn't that kind of girl. And believe me, I had the friends to make me that kind of girl, and I didn't do it.
Following their instincts and refusing to rely on assumptions alone, detectives decided to review every available surveillance camera across the county. It was exhausting, tedious work hours of watching footage, rewinding, cross-checking over and over again. But pretty quickly, that grind started paying off. Among hundreds of recordings, investigators uncovered new, deeply incriminating evidence that completely shifted how they understood what had happened that night. Shortly before Heather received that call, cameras captured Sydney inside a local Walmart. He was buying a pregnancy test, and given the nature of his relationship with Heather, that immediately raised red flags for investigators. When he was later asked whether the test had been for Heather, Sydney flatly denied it and claimed he bought it for his wife. Still, for detectives, this was yet another disturbing piece in an already complicated puzzle. Even more damning was footage from cameras placed along the isolated road leading to Peachtree Landing. This area is dark, remote, and almost completely deserted at night. On the recordings, a dark Ford F-150 can be clearly seen a truck that perfectly matched Sydney's pickup. At 3:36 a.m., the camera captured the vehicle driving toward the area where Heather's abandoned car would later be found. Exactly 10 minutes later, at 3:46, the same pickup appeared again, this time leaving the area. Experts would later confirm without hesitation. The truck in the footage was a 100% match to Sydney's vehicle. At that point, the situation looked especially alarming to investigators. Sydney was the last person known to have spoken with Heather, and, they believed, the last person to see her alive at Peachtree Landing. That fact became central to everything that followed in the investigation. Using phone records, detectives were able to reconstruct an almost step-by-step timeline of Heather's last known movements through her phone's data. That digital trail, her phone's silent shadow, became a witness to what happened that night. At 2:30 a.m., Heather's phone placed another call to the same payphone that had called her earlier. There was no answer. After that, the phone began moving toward Longbeard's Bar and Grill in Carolina Forest, near her apartment, and stayed there for about 15 minutes. Then the signal appeared near Augusta Plantation Drive, before returning again to Longbeard's Bar and Grill for another 15 minutes. A call was made to Sydney's phone, no answer. Next, the phone returned to Heather's apartment and remained there for roughly 5 minutes. At 3:25 a.m., another call was placed to Sydney. This time, he answered. The call lasted 4 minutes. At 3:37 a.m., Heather's phone began moving toward Peachtree Landing. 1 minute later, 3 attempts were made to call Sydney, all unanswered. At 3:41 a.m., one more failed attempt to reach him. At 3:42 a.m., Heather's phone appears to power off permanently, the location data lining up almost perfectly with the video of Sydney's pickup traveling to Peachtree Landing was incredibly incriminating. For investigators, this no longer felt like coincidence. It looked like a clear, deeply unsettling pattern. Even more evidence surfaced after detectives obtained a search warrant for the Moorer home. During the search, they discovered that on December 20th, under very strange circumstances, the couple had gotten rid of their home surveillance system. The very next day, December 21st, they installed a brand new one. The original system was never recovered. Because of that, investigators seized the new system, and what they found on it delivered another chilling blow. The footage showed Sydney and Tammy Moorer carefully washing the passenger side of the pickup truck. They moved slowly, deliberately, paying attention to every detail. Afterward, the rags they used to clean the vehicle were burned. All of this happened on the very same day the new cameras were installed. To investigators, the footage looked like a desperate attempt to erase evidence, and at the same time, a silent confession, captured without a single word being spoken.
Prayer vigil for Heather Elvis. It was held last night at Peachtree Boat Landing. Her car was found abandoned there in December 2013. Her family continues to ask anyone with information to come forward.
We just have a feeling that there's people out there that know something that haven't come forward yet. And we're just hoping that no matter how little they think it is, or how much trouble they think they might get into, or what people might think of them, that all of those things, they'll overcome that and just go ahead and come and tell what they know.
The Elvis family plans to hold a fundraiser next week to rebuild a community garden at the landing. They will spread rocks sold during that fundraiser in the garden on Heather's birthday, which is June 30th. Proceeds will go to the Q Center for Missing Persons.
And finally, after several long months in February of 2014, police were able to announce a breakthrough in the case. The kind of breakthrough everyone had been waiting for. And honestly, for a lot of people, it didn't come as a huge surprise when Sydney and Tammy Moorer were arrested in connection with the disappearance of Heather Elvis. Not long after that, they were formally charged with kidnapping, and despite the fact that Heather's body had not been found, they were also charged with murder. Investigators desperately needed to locate Heather to bring answers and closure, but the Moorers stayed silent.
Sydney and Tammy Moore are behind bars in connection with the disappearance of 20-year-old Heather Elvis.
I wanted to feel happy about it, but there's no joy in it. Heather's still not home.
And for over 2 months, frustratingly slow progress until Friday's arrest, where police also raided the couple's home.
Anything that we release at this point, it could do a lot more harm than it could do good.
The breakthrough in the case coming from a discovery made by Elvis's father. He says he looked up her cell phone records.
There were a lot of calls to one particular number in the last hours before the phone stopped working.
That number, the parents telling ABC News, belonged to 38-year-old Sydney Moore. Police say he and Elvis may have had a romantic relationship.
While the Moores were being held in custody, police never stopped working. They kept methodically building the case step by step, detail by detail, going through every statement, every piece of evidence, every fragment they had collected. And even though investigators felt confident about the direction of the case, really believed they were on the right track, the evidence just wasn't strong enough to legally prove the most serious charge possible: murder. In the end, the murder charges against Tammy and Sydney were dropped. The kidnapping charges, however, remained in place, and the case was far from over. Debbie later admitted that hearing the murder charge had been dismissed hit her hard. It felt like a painful blow, like yet another chance to get closer to the truth had slipped away. But at the same time, there was this unexpected, complicated sense of relief. She wouldn't have to sit through a trial where, over and over again, in graphic detail and endless speculation, people would dissect the worst possible things that might have happened to her daughter. Heather's family also held on to hope that this decision could somehow shift the situation, that maybe it would push someone to talk, to finally break the silence and share information that had stayed hidden for so long. After the murder charge was dropped, the Moores became eligible for bail. Tammy and Sydney were released and returned home, waiting for what would come next, and for trial on the kidnapping charge. For many people, this was deeply unsettling. Individuals tied to such a high-profile disappearance were suddenly back living their normal lives. After their release, despite clear instructions not to make public statements, they went straight to social media. There, Tammy and Sydney openly declared their innocence, insisting they had been set up and made into scapegoats. Those posts sparked outrage and only intensified public tension. Sydney Moore went even further. He gave an emotional television interview, trying to portray himself as a victim of circumstances. And for Heather's family, every word of it felt like another painful reminder that the most important answers were still missing.
Says he's frustrated he can't talk about it. He did talk about how it's hurting his family.
It's all a game. Everything's a game, and it's not a game. It never has been a game from the very beginning. The meanness that I've seen come out of people, it amazes me. How you can be so mean to someone you know nothing about a subject you know nothing about something that we did not do.
Since being charged, Sydney Moore says he's lost nearly everything he's worked for in his life and can't get a job while the case goes through the legal system. Despite the costs, Moore says he won't stop fighting the charges.
Because if I confess to something I didn't do, then there's a murderer or a kidnapper or whatever running around somewhere in this community, and no one even knows. That's the scary part.
Sydney's decision to ignore the court's ban on public comments eventually came back to hit him hard. His words, spoken in direct violation of a court order, didn't go unnoticed. For contempt of court, Sydney was sentenced to 5 months in jail. It was a separate conviction, but it only made his legal situation worse and highlighted just how tense and volatile this entire case had become. Meanwhile, Tammy made no effort to hide her anger. She spoke out publicly, clearly expressing a sense of persecution and hostility from the community, saying, "It feels like this town wants to crucify me over all the lies that are going on here." The words were loud, but they didn't change the reality. The case never faded from the attention of law enforcement or the public. The months dragged on, slow and heavy, quietly turning into years. The waiting stretched endlessly, and the tension only continued to build. In 2017, a new chapter opened for Sydney Moore. He was found guilty of obstruction of justice and sentenced to 10 years in prison. That ruling became yet another blow in a case that had long since grown beyond a standard criminal investigation. After that, the moment everyone had been bracing for finally arrived: the main trial. Sydney and Tammy faced court over the kidnapping of Heather Elvis. Proceedings unfolded under intense media scrutiny. Every detail, every statement, every movement inside the courtroom was closely followed and widely reported. By then, the case had become a national flashpoint, a symbol of a long, painful search for truth and answers that still hadn't been found. 6 years had passed since Heather was last seen alive. 6 years of waiting, heartbreak, and questions with no answers. After countless witness testimonies, an overwhelming volume of evidence, and many long, emotionally charged hours in court, the decisive moment finally came in 2019. It was time for the verdicts, the final chapter of the legal process, in a story that, for Heather's family, still felt painfully unfinished.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Tammy Moore, guilty of kidnapping.
Sydney Moore will spend 30 years in prison now for kidnapping and conspiracy in the case. The jury handed down that guilty verdict on Wednesday after less than 2 hours of deliberation.
I feel like I'm begging for my life for something that I didn't do, that I didn't have anything to do with.
Moore was ultimately sentenced to 30 years in prison for each charge. 2 sentences she'll serve at the same time.
In the end, justice did prevail. Tammy and Sydney Moore were found guilty of kidnapping Heather Elvis and were each sentenced to 30 years in prison. The verdict marked the culmination of a long, exhausting legal journey, one filled with years of waiting, painful hearings, and constant uncertainty for Heather's family. The sentence didn't bring Heather back, and it didn't fill the void her disappearance left behind. But it did establish one crucial truth. Responsibility was assigned, and the crime was formally recognized by the justice system. Even after the verdict was read, Sydney continued to insist on his innocence. Standing in court, he spoke calmly, without visible emotion, repeating words that, for Heather's family, sounded like yet another reminder of how many answers were still missing. I can't give Heather's family closure. If I could, I would. I have children of my own, I understand, but I have nothing to give them. Those words echoed through a courtroom that had spent years searching for the truth. For Heather's loved ones, they brought no relief. If anything, they underscored the hardest reality of all, that even after a conviction, the questions remained unanswered, and the so-called closure people talk about in courtrooms never truly came.
Get back in the back room, and Terry put his hands on my shoulders and he said, "Now what?" And I said, "Exactly. Because this is over, but we still haven't found Heather." And it's like I was telling the judge, there has to be something more. There has to be something more that we could hold over their head to make them talk. There's got to be some kind of an incentive. It was so hard to walk out of the courtroom knowing that that might be the last time we get to do anything.
As of the time this piece was created, Heather's body has still not been found. She remains missing with no grave, no goodbye, and no answers. To make sure she is never forgotten, and to keep attention on her case as well as the stories of other missing people, the Elvis family takes to the streets every year on June 30th, Heather's birthday. They put up missing person flyers all over the city, again and again sending the same message. This story isn't over, and this person hasn't disappeared from memory. It's a quiet but relentless ritual. Each poster isn't just a piece of paper with a photo and a name. It's a plea to look closer, to remember longer, and maybe, finally, to speak up. The family still holds on to hope that one day, someone won't be able to live with the silence anymore, and the truth about where Heather is will finally come out. Debbie has said more than once that persistence is... I hold on to this hope that one day I'll turn around, look toward the front door, and she'll walk in, he said. Do I truly believe, deep down, that it's going to happen? No, but I will never give up. Thank you so much for watching this video all the way to the end. I'd really appreciate your support. Subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and leave a comment if you can. Take care of yourselves, stay safe, and I'll see you next time.